With his infant sister crying against his chest, Eli faced the humiliation of being auctioned for stealing a single loaf of bread. The Apache warrior who stepped from the shadows offered not money, but strange payment, and an escape that terrified and beckoned all at once. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The sun hung mercilessly over Clearwater, Montana, its rays beating down on the weathered wooden platform in the town square like God's own judgment. 8-year-old Eli Matthews stood with his shoulders back despite the trembling in his knees, his threadbare shirt offering little protection against the scorching summer heat. In his thin arms, he cradled his 6-month-old sister, Sarah, her face red and tear-streaked, but mercifully quiet now after hours of hungry crying. "Next up," called Sheriff Thomas Blackwell, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd gathered in their Sunday best. One male child, approximately 8 years of age, guilty of theft from Henderson's General Store, being auctioned for a period of indenture not to exceed 4 years, as per the territorial statute regarding minor offenders without means to pay restitution. The words hung in the air like the dust motes dancing in the sunlight. Eli stared at the weathered boards beneath his bare feet, too ashamed to meet the eyes of the townspeople who had known his parents before the fever took them just 3 months ago. He could still hear his mother's last words, her voice barely a whisper. "Take care of Sarah. Promise me, Eli." He had promised. And when the meager supplies left in their cabin ran out, when Sarah's crying from hunger tore at his heart like physical pain, he had broken the law his father had taught him to respect. One loaf of bread, still warm from Mrs. Henderson's oven, tucked hastily into his shirt as he fled down the alley, but Mr. Henderson's son had been faster. "Do I hear an opening bid?" Sheriff Blackwell continued, resting his hand on Eli's shoulder. "The boy is strong for his age. Good worker, according to Reverend Simmons, who's been looking after him since his folks passed. The infant comes with him, cannot separate family under territorial law." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Taking on an 8-year-old boy was one thing, potentially useful for farm work or apprenticeship, but an infant girl complicated matters. $2, called a voice from the back. Farmer Jenkins, whose wife had died in childbirth the previous winter, leaving him with fields to tend and no one to care for his home. $3, countered Mrs. Whitfield, the boarding house owner, her calculating gaze suggesting she was already tallying how quickly she could train the boy to clean rooms and serve guests. Eli clutched Sarah tighter, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had heard whispered stories of what happened to children sold into indenture, worked to exhaustion, fed table scraps, sleeping in barns or root cellars. He would endure it all if it meant keeping Sarah fed. But the thought of his sister growing up without tenderness made his throat tighten. $5, came another voice deeper than the rest. The crowd parted like water around a stone, revealing a tall figure standing at the back of the gathering. Necks craned and whispers erupted as people recognized the man, not a townsperson, but an Apache warrior. His long black hair hanging in twin braids adorned with small beads of turquoise and bone. His buckskin shirt and leggings were worn but well made, and the knife at his belt glinted in the sunlight. Sheriff Blackwell's hand moved instinctively to the revolver at his hip. "This auction is for the good citizens of Clearwater, Swift Eagle," he said, his voice carrying an edge of warning. Swift Eagle stepped forward, his movements fluid and deliberate. The crowd drew back further, mothers pulling children behind their skirts, men straightening their postures in unconscious challenge. The Apache's dark eyes were fixed not on the sheriff, but on Eli and the infant in his arms. "Not bidding," Swift Eagle said, his English clear but touched with the cadence of his native tongue. "Offering trade." He reached slowly into a pouch at his waist and withdrew a small leather bundle tied with sinew. Unwrapping it carefully, he revealed a collection of herbs, stones, and what appeared to be dried roots. Even from where Eli stood, he could see the items were valuable, medicinal plants rare in the mountains, stones with veins of silver running through them. "Worth more than any bid here," Swift Eagle continued, his gaze now meeting the sheriff's. "Children belong with family. I take them to my people." A stunned silence fell over the square, broken only by the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. A sound that seemed to Eli, in that moment, like the whisper of a possibility he hadn't dared to imagine. Sheriff Blackwell's jaw tightened as he stared at the offering in Swift Eagle's outstretched hand. The crowd held its collective breath, the tension stretching like a bowstring pulled taut. For generations, relations between the white settlers and the Apache had been stained with blood and mistrust. The very idea of handing over white children to an Apache warrior was unthinkable, a violation of everything these frontier people believed about their place in this harsh territory. "You can't be serious," hissed Reverend Simmons, stepping forward with his Bible clutched to his chest like a shield. "These children need Christian raising. They need civilization." Swift Eagle didn't acknowledge the Reverend's words. His eyes remained locked with the sheriff's, a silent conversation passing between two men who understood power and its limits. Eli watched the exchange with wide eyes, feeling the weight of adult decisions hovering over his young shoulders. Sarah stirred against his chest, making small, mewling sounds of hunger. The sound seemed to crack something in Sheriff Blackwell's stern facade. "Why?" the sheriff finally asked, his voice low enough that only those closest could hear. "Why would you take these children? They're not your blood." A shadow passed over Swift Eagle's weathered face. Those who knew his story shifted uncomfortably. It was not a tale for polite company. 3 winters passed. Swift Eagle had returned from hunting to find his village razed by renegade soldiers. His wife and infant son had been among those slaughtered. Since then, he had walked a solitary path between two worlds, serving occasionally as translator or guide, but belonging fully to neither side. "Children without parents," Swift Eagle replied, his voice carrying a depth of meaning beyond the simple words. "My people care for all children. We do not auction our young ones." The rebuke was gentle, but unmistakable. A flush crept up the sheriff's neck. Mrs. Henderson pushed through the crowd, her apron still dusted with flour from the morning's baking. "It was my bread he stole," she said firmly, "and I say this has gone far enough. The boy just wanted to feed his sister." "Martha, the law is clear," her husband interjected, but she silenced him with a look that had grown men backing away. "The law also says a debt can be paid," she countered, turning to Swift Eagle. "Those herbs, the white sage and the golden seal, are worth more than 10 loaves. I accept them as payment for the theft." Swift Eagle inclined his head slightly, acknowledging her wisdom. Sheriff Blackwell removed his hat and ran a hand through his thinning hair. "That still doesn't settle the matter of the children. They can't just wander off with—" He hesitated, searching for words that wouldn't escalate tensions. "With an Apache?" Swift Eagle finished for him, no rancor in his tone. "I take them to Cedar Creek, the trading post. Widow Barrett there teaches children. White, Apache, Mexican. They can stay until your orphan train comes through in spring." Eli's heart leaped. He knew of Widow Barrett, a legend in the territory, a white woman who had married an Apache man decades ago and continued his work of fostering peace after his death. The trading post she ran at Cedar Creek was one of the few places where different peoples met on equal terms. A murmur ran through the crowd as people considered this compromise. Cedar Creek was 3 days' ride, far enough to ease the town's conscience about the orphans' fate, yet not so far as to place them entirely beyond the reach of civilization. "And if I refuse?" Sheriff Blackwell asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Swift Eagle's expression remained impassive. Then I leave. And tonight, when town sleeps, children also disappear. He nodded toward the surrounding hills. Many paths into mountains. Many friends who remember kindness to their children. It was not a threat, but a statement of fact, delivered with the calm certainty of a man who had survived by understanding the land and its people better than those who claimed to govern it. The sheriff replaced his hat, decision made. The debt to Henderson's is considered paid. He looked down at Eli. Boy, do you understand what's happening here? Eli nodded slowly, though in truth he understood only that choices were being made about his and Sarah's future. Choices in which he had no say, just as he'd had no say when fever took his parents or when hunger drove him to steal. You'll be going with Swift Eagle to Cedar Creek. Widow Barrett will look after you until spring, when the orphan train comes. Do you understand? Again, Eli nodded. The orphan train, carriages full of parentless children sent east to new families. He had heard whispers about it, mostly fearful ones from other children who had lost parents to disease or accident. Good, Sheriff Blackwell said, then turned to Swift Eagle. I expect them to be delivered safely. The Apache warrior nodded once, then stepped to the edge of the platform and held out his hands, not demanding, but offering. After a moment's hesitation, Eli stepped forward and allowed Swift Eagle to lift first Sarah, then himself, down from the auction block. The crowd dispersed slowly, like reluctant water draining from a basin, casting backward glances at the unusual trio, an Apache warrior, a scrawny white boy, and an infant girl. Swift Eagle paid them no mind as he guided Eli toward the hitching post, where a sturdy paint horse waited, its coat patterned in chestnut and white. The animal's dark eyes regarded the children with calm curiosity. We gather supplies, Swift Eagle said, his hand resting lightly on Eli's shoulder, then leave before sun touches mountains. Mrs. Henderson approached cautiously, carrying a small bundle wrapped in clean cloth. Food for the journey, she said, her eyes not meeting Swift Eagle's, but focusing instead on the children. And milk for the baby. It won't keep long in this heat, but it's better than nothing. Swift Eagle accepted the offering with a nod. Thank you, woman with good bread. A flicker of surprise crossed Mrs. Henderson's face, followed by a hesitant smile at the simple compliment. She reached out to touch Sarah's cheek, then turned to Eli. You're a brave boy, looking after your sister like this. Your mama would be proud. Eli swallowed hard against the sudden tightness in his throat. I promised her, he whispered. I know you did, child. I know. She pressed something into his hand, a small cloth pouch that clinked softly. A little money, she murmured. Hide it well. Every child needs something that's truly their own. Before Eli could stammer thanks, she turned and hurried back toward her store, wiping at her eyes with the corner of her apron. Swift Eagle pretended not to notice the exchange, busying himself with adjusting his saddlebags. We go to trading post first, he said. Need blankets for night. Journey takes 3 suns. The trading post stood at the edge of town, a weathered wooden structure with a sloping porch where old men usually sat playing checkers and sharing stories. Today it was empty, the usual loiterers having been drawn to the spectacle in the town square. Inside, the air smelled of leather, tobacco, and the sharp tang of preserved goods. Mr. Finch, the proprietor, eyed them warily from behind his counter, his hand drifting to the shotgun mounted on the wall behind him. What can I do for you, folks? He asked, the hesitation before the last word making his discomfort clear. Blankets, Swift Eagle replied, water skins, dried meat. Eli stood close to the Apache, Sarah growing heavy in his tired arms. The store was filled with wonders, glass jars of colorful candies, tools hanging from the ceiling, fabrics in patterns he'd never seen. In the corner, A wooden cradle caught his eye, reminding him of the one his father had made for Sarah, now left behind in their abandoned cabin. "I can pay," Swift Eagle continued, reaching for a smaller pouch at his belt. Mr. Finch's eyebrows rose. "Federal currency or trade goods?" "Silver," Swift Eagle replied, placing a small, rough nugget on the counter. The storekeeper's demeanor shifted instantly. He leaned forward, examining the offering with newfound respect. "That'll do nicely. Help yourselves to what you need." As Swift Eagle selected supplies with careful consideration, Eli noticed how differently the man moved in this space. Alert, efficient, his eyes constantly sweeping the store and the windows that faced the street. It reminded Eli of a deer his father had once shown him in the forest, beautiful but ever watchful, aware of its vulnerability among hunters. When Swift Eagle approached the counter with their supplies, Mr. Finch had another question. "Heard you're taking these youngsters to Widow Barrett at Cedar Creek." Swift Eagle nodded. "Trail's been troublesome lately," Finch said, lowering his voice. "Renegades from both sides causing grief for honest folks. You planning to stick to the main road?" "No roads are safe for all travelers," Swift Eagle replied, his meaning clear to both men. A main road might protect white travelers from certain dangers, but presented different risks for an Apache, especially one traveling with white children. "Well, you give Rebecca my regards when you reach Cedar Creek," Finch said, handing over the carefully wrapped supplies. "Tell her Jacob Finch says the new shipment of coffee beans should arrive before the first snow." Outside once more, Swift Eagle secured their supplies to his horse with practiced ease. He fashioned a simple sling from a length of soft leather, showing Eli how to secure Sarah against his chest. "For when arms grow tired," he explained, demonstrating the knots. Eli watched carefully, committing each movement to memory. "Will we ride your horse?" he asked, eyeing the animal's considerable height with trepidation. Swift Eagle shook his head. "Horse carries supplies. We walk until leaving town's sight. Safer this way." As they set out along the dusty road leading north from Clearwater, Eli felt the weight of stairs from windows and porches. Swift Eagle walked slightly ahead, leading the horse, his posture straight and his steps measured. Eli followed, Sarah secure in her new sling, his mind swirling with questions he didn't yet have the courage to ask. Behind them, the town that had been the only home Eli had ever known grew smaller with each step, until a bend in the road finally hid it from view. Ahead lay nothing but wilderness and the promise of Cedar Creek, a promise Eli could only hope would prove better than the life they were leaving behind. They traveled until the shadows grew long, Swift Eagle setting a pace that challenged Eli's small legs, but never pushed beyond what the boy could manage. When the sun began to sink behind the jagged mountain peaks, the Apache warrior led them off the trail into a small clearing beside a bubbling creek, sheltered by a stand of cottonwood trees. "We rest here," Swift Eagle announced, helping Eli lower Sarah from her sling. The baby fussed, her face scrunched in discomfort. "She needs changing," he observed, reaching into one of his saddlebags to produce a stack of soft rabbit skins. "These are clean, better than cloth for journey." Eli took them uncertainly. "I don't really know how," he admitted, shame coloring his voice. "Ma always did it, and then the Reverend's wife, Mrs. Simmons." Swift Eagle nodded without judgment. "I will show you. I had son once." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken grief. Swift Eagle demonstrated with gentle efficiency how to clean Sarah and wrap her in the soft skins, securing them with thin strips of leather. His large hands, calloused from years of hunting and fighting, handled the infant with surprising tenderness. "Your son," Eli ventured as Swift Eagle handed Sarah back to him, now cooing contentedly. "What was his name?" Swift Eagle was silent for so long that Eli thought he wouldn't answer. Finally he spoke, his voice low. Tarak, it means dancer in my language. He moved in his mother's womb like he was dancing to drums only he could hear. Eli swallowed. What happened to him? Swift Eagle began unpacking their supplies, his movements precise. Bluecoats came, soldiers who did not follow their chief's orders. They attacked our village while men were hunting. He paused, arranging stones in a circle for a fire pit. My wife, Nasha, tried to run with Tarak. They did not escape. Eli clutched Sarah closer. I'm sorry, he whispered, the words inadequate against such loss. Swift Eagle met his gaze. This is why I could not leave you on auction block. No child should be traded like horse or rifle. As darkness fell, Swift Eagle built a small fire, explaining to Eli how to arrange the wood to create heat with minimal smoke. He prepared a simple meal of dried meat softened in hot water, flavored with herbs from his pouch. For Sarah, he mixed the last of Mrs. Henderson's milk with a paste made from ground nuts and dried berries. Good for growing, he explained, as he showed Eli how to feed the mixture to Sarah using a small carved wooden spoon. My people feed this to babies when mothers cannot. Eli watched, fascinated by this glimpse into a world so different from his own. Your people seem to know a lot about surviving out here. Swift Eagle's mouth curved slightly. Not just surviving, living. He gestured to the night sky, now ablaze with stars. The land provides if you know how to ask. Your people try to change the land. My people learn from it. As they ate, a coyote's howl echoed in the distance, followed by another, closer. Eli tensed, inching nearer to the fire. They hunt small animals, Swift Eagle assured him, not interested in us. Are there other dangers? Eli asked, thinking of the storekeeper's warning about renegades. Swift Eagle considered the question. Always danger in life, but I know these mountains. We travel paths others do not see. Later, as Eli lay wrapped in a blanket with Sarah nestled against him, Swift Eagle took the first watch, his silhouette motionless against the dying fire. Eli fought against his heavy eyelids, wanting to ask more questions, to understand this strange man who had saved them from an uncertain fate. Sleep, Swift Eagle said softly, sensing the boy's resistance. Tomorrow brings many miles. But sleep eluded Eli as his mind filled with memories of Clearwater, of his parents' faces growing foggy in his recollection, of the stares of the townspeople as he stood on the auction block. Do you think they wanted us? He whispered into the darkness. The people in town. Do you think any of them really wanted to take us in? Swift Eagle was quiet for a moment. Want is not same as welcome, he finally replied. Some might want worker for farm or helper for house. Welcome means making space in heart. He added another small branch to the fire. My people have saying, the smallest lodge has room for a child. Eli considered this. Is that why you're taking us to Widow Barrett instead of to your people? Swift Eagle's expression softened in the firelight. My band moves with seasons, hard life for small baby. Widow Barrett's lodge stays in one place, has walls for winter, books for learning, but she knows Apache ways too, best of both worlds for children until they choose their path. Choose, Eli echoed, the concept foreign to him. When you are older, Swift Eagle confirmed, all people must choose their trail, cannot walk two paths with same feet. The philosophical turn confused Eli's tired mind, but something about the warrior's words settled into his heart like a stone finding its place in a riverbed. As he finally drifted towards sleep, lulled by Sarah's gentle breathing and the crackling fire, Eli wondered what path he would choose when the time came, and whether that choice would keep him and Sarah together. Dawn broke with fingers of pink and gold stretching across the eastern sky. Swift Eagle was already up, crouched by the creek, his hands moving through the clear water with practiced precision. When Eli stirred, rubbing sleep from his eyes, the Apache straightened, holding 2 silver-scaled fish. "Breakfast," he announced, a hint of pride in his voice. "Quick hands catch fish while they still dream." Sarah awoke with a hungry cry, her tiny fists waving in the air. Eli fumbled with the rabbit skin wrappings, his inexperienced fingers struggling with the leather ties. "You learn," Swift Eagle encouraged, setting the fish on a flat stone before coming to help. "All skills take time." After a breakfast of roasted fish and the last of Mrs. Henderson's bread, they continued their journey. The terrain grew more challenging as they left the well-traveled paths, Swift Eagle leading them through narrow valleys and across shallow streams, always with an eye to the surrounding landscape. "How do you know which way to go?" Eli asked, adjusting Sarah in her sling. "There's no road here." Swift Eagle pointed to the sun, then to subtle marks on trees they passed. Many signs for those who learn to see. Sun tells direction. Trees show where water flows. Animals make paths to good places. He gestured to a barely visible trail of disturbed grass. Deer went this way toward water. Where deer drink, people can drink. Eli tried to see what Swift Eagle saw, but the wilderness still appeared chaotic and intimidating to his town-raised eyes. Yet he couldn't help but notice how the Apache moved through it with the comfort of a man walking through his own home. By midday, the sky had darkened ominously. Swift Eagle studied the gathering clouds, his expression grave. "Storm comes. Big one." He scanned the rocky outcroppings ahead. "Need shelter." They quickened their pace, Sarah growing fussy in her sling as the wind picked up. Eli felt the first fat droplets of rain on his face, just as Swift Eagle led them toward a rocky overhang nestled against a hillside. "Here," the warrior said, tethering his horse in the shelter of the rock. "We'll keep worst rain off." They had barely settled beneath the overhang when the sky split open. Rain fell in sheets so thick Eli could barely see beyond the edge of their shelter. Lightning cracked across the sky, followed by thunder that shook the very ground beneath them. Sarah wailed in terror, her cries barely audible over nature's fury. Swift Eagle calmly unpacked their supplies, creating a small nest of blankets deeper under the overhang. "Put Sarah here," he instructed, "away from wind." Eli placed his sister in the makeshift bed, but her crying only intensified. He tried rocking her, whispering soothing words as their mother had done, but nothing seemed to calm her. Swift Eagle watched for a moment, then reached into a small pouch at his waist. He withdrew something that looked like a smooth stone. Kneeling beside Sarah, he began to rub the stone together with his thumb and forefinger. To Eli's astonishment, the stone produced a low, humming sound that somehow cut through both the storm's roar and Sarah's cries. "Singing stone," Swift Eagle explained, continuing the rhythmic motion. "Vibrations calm spirit, remind of mother's heartbeat." Sarah's wails gradually subsided to hiccuping sobs, then to curious silence as she stared at Swift Eagle with wide, tear-filled eyes. When he handed the stone to Eli, showing him how to create the soothing sound, the boy felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you," Eli said softly. Swift Eagle nodded, a shadow of sadness crossing his features. "I used for Tarak when storms frightened him." As the storm raged outside their shelter, Swift Eagle used the forced rest to tend to his horse and inspect their supplies. He showed Eli how to check Sarah for rashes or sores from the rabbit skin wrappings, explaining which plants could soothe infant skin if needed. "You are good brother," Swift Eagle observed as Eli gently massaged Sarah's legs and arms, checking for any signs of discomfort. Eli's chest tightened with unexpected emotion. "She's all I have left," he admitted. "No," Swift Eagle corrected gently. "Now you have more. You have path forward. You have people waiting at Cedar Creek who will help." "But for how long?" Eli asked, voicing the fear that had plagued him since the auction block. The sheriff said we'd be put on the orphan train come spring. Swift Eagle sat back on his heels, studying Eli with those fathomless dark eyes. Many moons before spring, much can change in that time. Like what? Eli pressed. Like you, Swift Eagle replied simply. Like hearts of those who will know you. He reached out and touched Sarah's cheek with a gentle finger. The baby's tiny hand captured his much larger one, her fingers wrapping instinctively around his weather-roughened thumb. Something flickered in the Apache's gaze. Surprise, then a softening that transformed his entire face. "She knows, good heart," Swift Eagle murmured, allowing the infant to maintain her grip. "Children see truth, adults forget." The storm continued through the afternoon, forcing them to spend the night beneath the rocky overhang. Swift Eagle built a small fire near the entrance where the smoke could escape, and they ate a spare meal of dried meat and berries. As darkness fell completely, the storm finally began to subside, leaving behind a gentle patter of rain and occasional distant rumbles of thunder. Swift Eagle sat cross-legged at the edge of their shelter, his profile outlined against the dying firelight. "Storm had much to teach," he said quietly. Eli looked up from where he lay next to Sarah. "What do you mean?" "It showed shelter where we did not see before," Swift Eagle explained. "It gave Earth needed water. It reminded us we are small but strong." He turned to Eli with the barest hint of a smile. "And it showed that Sarah trusts me now. All good lessons." Looking at his sister's peaceful, sleeping face, Eli realized that Swift Eagle was right. The storm had changed something between them all, created a bond where before there had been only cautious necessity. As he closed his eyes, lulled by the gentle aftermath of the storm, Eli wondered what other lessons awaited them on the path to Cedar Creek. Morning came with the fresh-washed clarity that often follows a storm. The world smelled of damp earth and pine, and raindrops clung to every leaf and needle, transforming the forest into a glittering cathedral when sunlight finally broke through the clouds. Eli emerged from their rocky shelter to find Swift Eagle already kneeling beside a small fire, boiling water in a battered tin cup. "Tea," the Apache explained, crushing dried leaves between his fingers and sprinkling them into the water. "Gives strength for journey." After a breakfast of the fragrant tea and dried berries softened in the hot water, they set out again, the earth soft and yielding beneath their feet. Swift Eagle led them along a narrow ridge that offered breathtaking views of the valley below. In the distance, Eli could see a silver ribbon of river winding through the landscape. "Is that where we're going?" he asked, pointing. Swift Eagle nodded. "Cedar Creek meets that river. One more day, maybe two." The path grew steeper as they descended toward the valley, forcing Swift Eagle to lead his horse with extra care. Eli struggled to keep his footing on the slippery ground, Sarah's weight in the sling making balance even more difficult. "Like this," Swift Eagle demonstrated, showing Eli how to place his feet sideways on the slope, creating natural steps. Small feet, small steps, no hurry. By midday, they reached more level ground, and Swift Eagle allowed a brief rest beside a clear stream. While the Apache refilled their water skins, Eli sat with Sarah on his lap, letting her tiny fingers grasp at wildflowers growing along the bank. Her delighted gurgles brought an unconscious smile to his tired face. "She grows stronger," Swift Eagle observed, returning with the filled skins. "Good color in her cheeks now." Eli nodded proudly. "She's eating better too." "Children are like young trees," Swift Eagle said, helping Eli secure Sarah in her sling again. "They bend with wind, but grow towards sun." As they continued their journey, Swift Eagle began to point out edible plants along their path, occasionally stopping to gather leaves or roots and explain their uses. "This one," he said, indicating a plant with jagged leaves, "stops bleeding when crushed on wound. This one," he gestured to a cluster of berries, gives good sleep when brewed as tea. Eli tried to commit each lesson to memory, fascinated by this knowledge that had never been taught in Reverend Simmons' Sunday school. "How do you know all this?" he asked. "My grandfather was medicine man," Swift Eagle replied. "He taught me to listen to plants. They speak if ears are open." The afternoon sun was warm on their backs as they followed the gentle slope toward the river valley. The terrain had changed from dense forest to more open country, with scattered groves of trees and meadows bright with late summer wildflowers. Swift Eagle maintained a vigilant watch, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. It was this watchfulness that saved them. Swift Eagle stopped so abruptly that Eli nearly bumped into him, the Apache's arm shooting out protectively to keep the boy behind him. "What?" Eli began, but Swift Eagle silenced him with a quick gesture. Ahead on the trail, partially concealed by a stand of aspen trees, were three men on horseback. Even from a distance, Eli could see they were rough-looking, unshaven, their clothes travel-stained and their horses heavily laden with packs. One wore a tattered Union Army coat, another had a bandana tied around his neck, and the third wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes. "Bad men," Swift Eagle murmured, his voice barely audible. "We go around." Before they could retreat, however, one of the men glanced in their direction and called out, "Ho there! You on the trail!" Swift Eagle remained perfectly still, his hand now resting lightly on the knife at his belt. The men conferred briefly, then all three turned their horses toward them, approaching at a walk. "Stay behind me," Swift Eagle instructed Eli. "If I say run, you go into trees. Follow stream uphill." Eli's heart pounded so loudly he was certain everyone could hear it. Sarah, sensing his tension, began to whimper softly. "Well, now, what have we here?" the man in the Union coat said as they drew closer, his tone falsely friendly. His eyes took in Swift Eagle's appearance, then shifted to Eli and the baby. His eyebrows rose. "Interesting traveling party." "We pass in peace," Swift Eagle said, his English deliberate and clear. "Journey to Cedar Creek." The man with the bandana spat on the ground. "Ain't that touching? An Injun with white kids." His hand rested casually on the revolver at his hip. "What's your business with them, Redskin? Ransom, or something worse?" Swift Eagle did not rise to the bait. "Children go to Widow Barrett. I guide them." The third man, silent until now, leaned forward in his saddle. "Widow Barrett, you say? The half-breed's woman at the trading post?" Swift Eagle's expression remained impassive, but Eli saw how his shoulders tensed at the slur. "Seems mighty suspicious to me," Bandana continued. "Maybe we ought to relieve you of your burden, Injun. For the children's sake, of course." His mouth twisted in an ugly smile. "The children are not burden," Swift Eagle replied, his voice steady despite the threat. "They are under my protection." The leader in the Union coat studied them thoughtfully. "How do we know you didn't steal these kids? Maybe there's a reward for their return." "No reward," Swift Eagle said. "Only journey to safe place." The third man dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate. "I say we take the kids, and whatever else this Apache's carrying." He drew his revolver with practiced ease. "No one's going to miss one more dead Indian in these hills." Eli felt terror rise in his throat like bile, but before he could react, Swift Eagle moved with astonishing speed. In one fluid motion, he pulled Eli and Sarah behind the bulk of his horse, creating a barrier between them and the armed men. "Last chance," Swift Eagle said, and something in his voice had changed, a deadly calm that made even the armed men hesitate. "Go your way, we go ours." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring, the only sound Sarah's frightened whimpers and the nervous shuffling of hooves on the damp earth. Eli clutched his sister close, feeling utterly helpless. In that moment, he would have given anything for his father's rifle or even Sheriff Blackwell's stern presence. Then, from somewhere in the surrounding forest, came the distinctive call of a hawk. Except it wasn't quite right. Eli had heard enough hawks around Clearwater to know that this call was a human imitation, skilled but imperfect. The armed men heard it too, their heads turning sharply toward the sound. A second call answered from the opposite direction, then a third. "Apache signals," the leader muttered, eyes narrowing as he scanned the tree line. "How many of your friends are out there, Injun?" Swift Eagle said nothing, his face revealing nothing. After a tense moment, the leader gestured to his companions. "Mount up. These brats aren't worth an arrow in the back." As they prepared to ride off, he fixed Swift Eagle with a hard stare. "You tell Widow Barrett that Silas Cutter sends his regards. Tell her we'll be seeing her soon enough." The men wheeled their horses around and rode back the way they had come, occasionally glancing over their shoulders until they disappeared around a bend in the trail. When the sound of hoofbeats had faded completely, Swift Eagle finally relaxed his vigilant posture. He turned to find Eli trembling, tears streaming silently down the boy's pale face as he clutched Sarah protectively. "They're gone now," Swift Eagle assured him softly. "You are safe." "Were there really other Apaches in the woods?" Eli asked, his voice barely a whisper. Swift Eagle's mouth curved in a slight smile. "No, only voices I made earlier," he demonstrated, cupping his hands around his mouth and producing the hawk call that had saved them. "Old hunter trick. Sound travels far in valley, makes enemies think many where there is one." "Those men," Eli said, "they knew Widow Barrett. They said—" He hesitated, unsure if he should repeat the cruel words. "They said many wrong things," Swift Eagle replied, his tone hardening. "Men like that understand only power, not truth." He knelt to check that Sarah was unharmed, his large hand gentle as it brushed her cheek. "We should leave this place. They may return with more men." Swift Eagle led them off the main trail, cutting across a meadow toward a denser patch of forest. As they walked, Eli found courage to ask the question burning in his mind. Who is Silas Cutter? Why did he say those things about Widow Barrett? Swift Eagle was silent for several paces, as if weighing how much to reveal. "Cutter is bad man who wants what is not his," he finally said. "He sells whiskey to my people, takes furs, horses, even land for payment." His jaw tightened. "Widow Barrett stops his trade at Cedar Creek. She makes fair deals, teaches reading, helps sick. Cutter hates her for this." "And what did he mean about half-breed?" Eli asked hesitantly. Swift Eagle's expression softened slightly. "Widow Barrett was married to man of mixed blood. White father, Apache mother, man named James Barrett. He built trading post as place where all people could trade in peace." He paused, ducking beneath a low-hanging branch. 7 winters ago, men like Cutter killed him, left Widow Barrett alone to run trading post. Why didn't she leave? Eli wondered aloud. "Same reason mountain does not move when wind blows," Swift Eagle replied. "She belongs to that place now. It is her purpose." He seemed to search for the right English word. "Her calling." They continued in silence for a time, Swift Eagle occasionally stopping to check their surroundings or adjust their course. As the day wore on, Eli noticed that the Apache was leading them higher into the hills rather than down toward the river valley. "I thought Cedar Creek was by the river," Eli said, panting slightly from the climb. "This way safer," Swift Eagle explained. "High ground sees what comes. Tonight we make camp on ridge. Tomorrow we signal Cedar Creek." By nightfall, they reached a small plateau sheltered by wind-twisted pines. From this vantage point, they could see for miles across the valley, including the ribbon of river they had spotted earlier. As Swift Eagle prepared their camp with practiced efficiency, Eli attended to Sarah, who had remarkably slept through much of the afternoon's journey. Her eyes, when they opened, seemed more alert, more focused than before. "She's watching everything," Eli observed, as Sarah's gaze followed Swift Eagle's movements around the camp. "Children learn from watching," Swift Eagle replied. "She is good student already." After a quiet meal, Swift Eagle built up the fire, slightly larger than usual. Eli, recalling their need for secrecy, looked at him questioningly. "Fire speaks tonight," Swift Eagle explained. He began carefully placing green branches on the flames, creating billows of white smoke that rose straight up in the still evening air. Then, using a blanket, he covered and uncovered the fire in a deliberate pattern, sending puffs of smoke skyward. "Smoke signals," Eli realized, watching in fascination. Swift Eagle nodded. "Telling Cedar Creek we come tomorrow, asking if path is safe." "Will they see it?" Eli asked, gazing across the vast expanse between their ridge and the distant valley. "Rebecca Barrett watches for signals every sunset," Swift Eagle said with certainty. "It is our way since her husband died. Apache friends keep her safe. She keeps trading posts safe for all." As if in confirmation, a small light appeared in the distant valley. Not a fire, but what appeared to be a lantern being moved in a specific pattern. "She answers," Swift Eagle said, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Path clear to Cedar Creek." Later, as they sat by the dying embers of their signal fire, Sarah finally asleep after a feeding of nut paste and water, Swift Eagle reached into his saddlebag and withdrew something wrapped in soft leather. He unfolded it carefully to reveal a small book with a worn leather cover. "James Barrett gave me this," he said, handling the book with reverence. "Taught me to read English words." Eli leaned closer, surprised. "You can read?" Swift Eagle nodded solemnly. "Some words, enough for trading, enough for stories." He opened the book, revealing pages filled with dense type and occasional illustrations. Bible stories James made simple. He believed Creator speaks in many languages, many ways. He handed the book to Eli. "You read?" Eli took it carefully, pride swelling in his chest. "Yes. Ma taught me before she got sick. And I went to school some." "Read to me," Swift Eagle requested, settling back against his saddle. Eli found a page with a story he recognized. David and Goliath. His voice, hesitant at first, grew stronger as he read about the young shepherd facing the giant warrior with nothing but courage and a sling. When he finished, Swift Eagle was quiet for a moment. "Good story," he finally said. "Small one defeating big enemy. Courage more important than strength. Like you against those men today," Eli said without thinking. Swift Eagle looked at him, surprise flickering in his dark eyes. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Fear is not shame. How we act with fear, that is what matters." The confession startled Eli. The idea that this powerful warrior who had faced down armed men without flinching could feel fear seemed impossible. "I was scared too," Eli whispered. "I thought they were going to kill you and take us." "Fear kept you alive," Swift Eagle said simply. "Made you ready to run if needed. Fear is like fire, can warm or burn. Depends how you use it." As the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, Eli found himself studying the Apache's profile against the night sky. 3 days ago, this man had been a stranger, an object of both fascination and fear. Now, somehow, he had become something else, a protector, a teacher, perhaps even a friend. "Tomorrow," Swift Eagle said softly, as if sensing Eli's thoughts, "you meet Widow Barrett. Begin new chapter in your story." "Will you stay?" Eli asked, the question escaping before he could consider it. Swift Eagle turned to look at him, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "For a time," he answered, "until I know you and Sarah are truly safe." It wasn't a promise of forever, but as Eli curled up beside his sister under the blanket Swift Eagle had provided, it felt enough for now. Cedar Creek appeared first, as a thin spiral of smoke rising against the backdrop of the valley, then gradually took shape as a cluster of sturdy log buildings nestled in a grove of towering cedar trees. As they descended the final slope, Eli could make out a larger central structure with a wide porch, flanked by several smaller cabins and a corral holding horses and a few mules. A creek, presumably the one that gave the place its name, sparkled in the morning light as it wound past the settlement. "Barrett Trading Post," Swift Eagle announced, a note of quiet pride in his voice. "Safe place between two worlds." As they drew closer, Eli noticed details that set this place apart from Clearwater. The trading post flew no American flag, but rather a simple banner showing a white handprint on a blue background. The porch held rocking chairs alongside traditional Apache sitting mats. Most strikingly, the people moving around the buildings formed a tapestry of diversity unlike anything Eli had seen before. White settlers in homespun clothing, Mexicans in colorful garments, and Apache in traditional dress, all coexisting in apparent harmony. A woman emerged from the main building, shading her eyes against the morning sun as she spotted their approach. Even from a distance, she commanded attention, tall and straight-backed despite her years, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a simple bun at the nape of her neck. She wore a practical split skirt of blue cotton and a white blouse with intricate beadwork along the collar. As they drew closer, Eli could see the lines of experience etched around her eyes and mouth, suggesting a life that had seen both joy and hardship in equal measure. "Swift Eagle," she called, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. "Your smoke signals brought welcome news." Swift Eagle inclined his head respectfully as they reached the porch steps. "Rebecca Barrett," he replied formally. "I bring children as promised." Widow Barrett's gaze fell on Eli and Sarah, her expression softening. "So I see," she said gently. "Come inside, all of you. You look as though you've had quite a journey." The interior of the trading post was a fascinating blend of cultures. One half contained the expected provisions, sacks of flour and coffee beans, bolts of fabric, tools and other necessities for frontier life. The other half showcased beautifully crafted Apache baskets, pottery and beadwork, alongside Mexican leather goods and silver jewelry. But what caught Eli's eye was the far wall, covered entirely with shelves of books, more books than he had ever seen outside of Reverend Simmons' study. "Your eyes find what they hunger for," Widow Barrett observed with a smile, noticing his gaze. "Those books are for everyone here, to borrow, to learn from, to learn." James believed education was the true common ground between peoples. She led them through a doorway into private living quarters behind the store. A cozy room with a stone fireplace, comfortable-looking furniture, and colorful woven rugs covering the plank floor. A pot of something fragrant simmered over the fire. "You must be hungry," she said, gesturing for them to sit. "Swift Eagle, I assume you've been feeding these children as best you could on the trail. But nothing beats a proper meal after days of traveling." As she ladled thick stew into wooden bowls, Eli caught Swift Eagle watching her with an expression that seemed almost respectful, admiring. It was hard to define, but it suggested a history between them beyond what he had shared with Eli. "The children are from Clearwater," Swift Eagle explained as they ate. "Boy is Eli. Baby is Sarah. Parents dead from fever. Sheriff put boy on auction block for stealing bread." Widow Barrett's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "Auction block?" she repeated, a dangerous edge to her voice. "In 1873, I thought we'd seen the end of such barbaric practices." "For criminals who cannot pay debts," Swift Eagle clarified. "Boy stole to feed sister." Widow Barrett turned to Eli, her eyes gentle despite the anger in her voice. "You did what any loving brother would do," she assured him. "Here, there will be no punishment for feeding your family." Eli swallowed hard against the unexpected kindness. "Thank you, ma'am," he managed. Rebecca, she corrected softly, or Mrs. Barrett if you prefer, but there's no need for ma'am here. Sarah, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly began to fuss. Eli reached for her automatically, but his movements were clumsy with fatigue after the long journey. "May I?" Widow Barrett asked, holding out her arms. After a moment's hesitation, Eli nodded, and she lifted Sarah with practiced ease. "Hello, little one," she murmured, examining the baby with a knowing eye. "You've done well with her," she told Eli. "Many infants wouldn't survive such a journey, but she seems strong." "Swift Eagle knew what to do," Eli admitted. "He showed me how to make food she could eat and how to keep her warm at night." Widow Barrett's gaze flicked to the Apache, who was focused intently on his stew. "That doesn't surprise me," she said softly. "Swift Eagle has always had a gentle heart beneath his warrior's exterior." Something passed between the two adults, a look laden with unspoken understanding. Eli sensed histories and secrets swirling just beyond his comprehension. "There are men," Swift Eagle said abruptly, setting down his spoon. "Cutter and others. They stopped us on trail." The warmth drained from Widow Barrett's face. "What did they want?" "To take children. Said to tell you Silas Cutter sends regards. Said he will see you soon." Widow Barrett's arms tightened protectively around Sarah. "I see," she said, her voice steady despite the shadow that had fallen across her features. "Then we have preparations to make." Eli looked between them, confusion and fear rising in his chest. "What does that mean? Are those men coming here?" Widow Barrett smiled reassuringly, though her eyes remained troubled. "Don't worry about that now, Eli. You're safe here, and so is Sarah. Swift Eagle brought you to the right place." She rose, still cradling Sarah. "Let me show you where you'll be staying. You need rest after your journey." As they followed her through the trading post toward one of the smaller cabins outside, Eli noticed how the other people in the settlement watched Swift Eagle, with respect, but also with the slight wariness one might show a mountain lion that had chosen to walk peacefully among them. The Apache warrior seemed both part of this place and apart from it, connected yet separate. The cabin assigned to Eli and Sarah was small but comfortable, with a single room containing 2 narrow beds, a cradle clearly crafted by skilled hands, and a stone fireplace that kept the autumn chill at bay. Windows on either side allowed for cross-ventilation in the warmer hours of the day, and colorful woven blankets adorned the walls, providing both insulation and beauty. 5 days had passed since their arrival at Cedar Creek, and Eli was still adjusting to the rhythm of life in this unusual community. Each morning, he woke to the sounds of the trading post coming alive, horses nickering in the corral, the metallic ring of the blacksmith's hammer, and voices conversing in a blend of English, Spanish, and Apache. Widow Barrett had taken to caring for Sarah during the day, allowing Eli to help around the trading post and attend the small school she ran in one of the cabins. There, children of varied backgrounds sat together on long benches, learning reading and numbers alongside traditional knowledge from both settler and indigenous cultures. The future of this territory depends on understanding between peoples, Widow Barrett had explained when Eli expressed surprise at seeing Apache children learning to read English, while white children practiced Apache words. "My James believed that, and so do I." Swift Eagle, meanwhile, seemed to exist on the periphery of Cedar Creek's daily life. He came and went with the shadows, sometimes disappearing into the surrounding wilderness for hours, only to return with game for the communal cooking pot or news from distant Apache camps. Yet Eli noticed that despite his apparent independence, the warrior always seemed to keep the trading post within sight. On this particular morning, Eli sat on the porch of the main building, Sarah propped against his knees as he entertained her with a small wooden toy carved by one of the Apache elders. The baby had flourished in the days since their arrival, her face filling out and her eyes bright with curiosity. "She grows strong," came Swift Eagle's voice as he approached silently from the side of the building. "Good food, safe sleep, make difference." Eli nodded, still marveling at how the warrior could move without making a sound. "Mrs. Barrett says she's the healthiest baby she's seen in a long time." Swift Eagle sat beside them on the porch steps, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun climbed steadily into a cloudless sky. Rebecca Barrett knows children, knows healing. A shadow passed over his features. Knows fighting when necessary. The last comment made Eli glance up sharply. "Because of Cutter?" he asked, his voice dropping instinctively. Swift Eagle gave a single nod. "Men seen scouting Valley yesterday. Not hunters, not traders." Fear coiled in Eli's stomach. "Are they coming here? For us?" "Not for you," Swift Eagle corrected gently. "For what this place stands for Rebecca." He ran a hand along the smooth wood of his bow, which rarely left his side these days. Cutter wants trading post, wants route through mountains for whiskey trade. Rebecca stops this for many years, makes enemies. The door opened behind them, and Widow Barrett emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes took in their serious expressions immediately. "Telling tales of doom and gloom, Swift Eagle?" she asked, but there was no real admonishment in her tone. "Truth is not always gentle," he replied. "Boy should understand shadow coming." Widow Barrett sighed and settled herself in one of the porch rocking chairs. "Eli deserves to know, yes." She reached for Sarah, who went to her willingly now, familiar with her gentle hands. "But he also deserves not to carry adult burdens on young shoulders." Swift Eagle's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You speak wisdom, as always." The exchange confirmed Eli's suspicion that these two shared a history deeper than they acknowledged. Their words carried the weight of old conversations, old disagreements, perhaps even old affections. "Is Cutter really coming?" Eli asked, unable to contain the question burning within him. Widow Barrett met his eyes directly, her gaze steady and honest. "Yes, I believe he is. He's been trying to force me off this land for years. The trading post sits at a crucial junction between territories. Whoever controls Cedar Creek controls much of the trade in this region." "Why doesn't he just build his own trading post?" Eli wondered. A hint of a smile touched Widow Barrett's lips. "Because this land was granted to James Barrett by treaty, one of the few the government has actually honored, mostly because this particular piece of ground wasn't deemed valuable enough to steal back." She adjusted Sarah on her lap. "What Cutter doesn't understand is that the true value of Cedar Creek isn't the land itself, but the trust built between peoples over many years. Trust he would destroy with whiskey and false promises," Swift Eagle added, his voice hardening. Widow Barrett nodded grimly. "The Apache have suffered enough without adding poison that steals minds and hearts. James gave his life protecting this place as a sanctuary. I won't dishonor his memory by yielding to threats." "But if Cutter brings men with guns," Eli began, fear making his voice tremble. "We have sent for help," Swift Eagle assured him. "Friends come, Apache warriors who respect Rebecca, white settlers who trade honestly here. And we have Swift Eagle," Widow Barrett added, something like pride warming her voice, "who has stood as this trading post guardian since before you were born, Eli." Swift Eagle looked away, as if uncomfortable with the praise. "I made promise to James. Apache does not break word given to friend." Later that day, as dusk painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Eli watched from his cabin window as Swift Eagle and Widow Barrett conferred with a group of men, some Apache, some white, one Mexican, around a table hastily erected in the yard. Maps were spread out, voices kept low but urgent. The atmosphere throughout Cedar Creek had shifted from busy contentment to watchful readiness. A soft knock drew his attention to the door. Anna, a half-Mexican, half-Apache girl about his own age who had befriended him in school, stood on the threshold. "Mama says I should help with baby," she announced, stepping inside without waiting for invitation. "So grown-ups can talk war plans." "They're not planning war," Eli protested, though he wasn't entirely convinced. Anna shrugged, reaching for Sarah, who gurgled happily at the sight of her. "Close enough. Mama says Cutter has 15 men, maybe more. Bad men who like hurting people." She bounced Sarah gently. "But Swift Eagle has called warriors from 3 bands. They will come because Widow Barrett healed their children when mountain fever came last winter." "How do you know all this?" Eli asked, impressed despite his concern. Anna grinned. "I listen when grown-ups think children don't understand. My father was Mexican trader. My mother is Apache. I understand many words in many languages." Her expression grew serious. "Cutter calls Widow Barrett Indian lover, like it's bad thing. But loving people different from you takes courage. That's what my mother says." From outside came the sound of horses approaching, not the thunder of an attack, but the measured pace of travelers. Eli and Anna peered through the window to see 3 Apache riders entering the trading post yard, their faces painted with red and black stripes. "War chiefs," Anna whispered, awe in her voice. "Now Cutter will think twice before attacking." As night fell completely, lanterns were lit around the perimeter of Cedar Creek. Guards, both Apache and white, took up positions at strategic points. Inside the main building, Eli could see shadows moving as plans continued to be made. For the first time since arriving at the trading post, Swift Eagle came to their cabin as Eli was preparing for bed. The warrior knelt beside him, his face solemn in the lamplight. "Tomorrow may bring trouble," he said without preamble. "If fighting starts, you take Sarah to root cellar behind main building. Stay there until someone comes for you." Eli nodded, throat too tight for words. Swift Eagle placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have courage of warrior, Eli Matthews. Few boys your age could do what you have done for sister." He reached into a pouch at his belt and withdrew something small that gleamed in the dim light. This was Tarek's. "Now it is yours." He pressed the object into Eli's palm, a small carving of an eagle in flight, fashioned from what appeared to be polished bone. Eli stared at it, understanding the significance of such a gift. "I can't take this," he whispered. "It was your son's." Swift Eagle closed Eli's fingers around the carving. "Tarek walks in spirit world now. He would be proud to see it in hands of brave brother who protects his family." He rose to his feet. "Sleep now. Dawn comes early, and with it, whatever the new day brings." As the door closed behind the Apache warrior, Eli clutched the bone eagle tightly, tears stinging his eyes. In that moment, he felt the weight of everything they had endured since his parents' death. The hunger, the fear, the auction block, the dangerous journey. Yet somehow, here in this fragile haven caught between worlds, he had found something he thought lost forever. A sense of belonging. Dawn arrived in a wash of pale gold and lavender, the quiet beauty of the sunrise belying the tension that gripped Cedar Creek. Eli had slept fitfully, the bone eagle clutched in his hand, waking at every sound that might herald approaching danger. He found Sarah already awake in her cradle, unusually quiet, as if even she sensed the gravity of the day ahead. He had just finished dressing when Anna appeared at his door, her face solemn. "They're coming," she said without preamble. "Riders spotted from the North Ridge, many men." Eli's heart hammered against his ribs as he gathered Sarah into his arms. "Should we go to the root cellar now?" Anna shook her head. "Not yet. Widow Barrett says to come to the main building first. Everyone gathers there." The trading post's main room had been transformed overnight, Furniture had been pushed against walls, windows were partially boarded, and weapons, rifles, bows, even a few old cavalry sabers had been distributed among those prepared to fight. At the center of this controlled chaos stood Widow Barrett, her silver-streaked hair bound tightly at the nape of her neck, a rifle that looked well used resting in the crook of her arm. "Eli," she called when she spotted him. "Come here, child." He approached, cradling Sarah protectively. Widow Barrett's eyes were clear and steady, showing no fear despite the danger approaching. "I need you to understand something important," she said, kneeling to his level. "Whatever happens today, this place, what we've built here, it matters. It matters because it shows what could be possible everywhere if people chose understanding over fear." Eli nodded, not trusting his voice. "I made a promise when you arrived," she continued, "that you would be safe here. I intend to keep that promise." She reached out to touch Sarah's downy head. "This little one deserves a chance to grow up in a world better than the one we've known." From outside came the sound of approaching hoofbeats, no longer distant, but growing steadily louder. Widow Barrett straightened, her expression hardening into resolve. "Take Sarah to the root cellar now," she instructed. "Anna knows the way. Stay there until one of us comes for you. Myself, Swift Eagle, or Thomas." She nodded toward the gray-haired settler who had been among those studying maps the previous evening. "What if—" Eli began, but couldn't bring himself to finish the question. Widow Barrett understood nonetheless. "If none of us comes by nightfall, there's a tunnel from the cellar that leads to the creek bank. Follow it, then head east along the water until you reach the Miller homestead. They'll help you." The possibility that they might all fall, that Cedar Creek itself might fall, struck Eli with terrible clarity. "I don't want to leave," he whispered. "Nor do I want you to go," she replied gently. "But Sarah needs you to be brave for her, just as you've been all along." As Anna led him toward the back of the building, Eli caught sight of Swift Eagle entering through the front door. The Apache warrior was dressed for battle, his face bearing streaks of red and black paint. A quiver of arrows slung across his back. Their eyes met briefly across the room, a silent exchange that conveyed more than words could express. The root cellar was cool and dark, smelling of earth and the vegetables stored in bins along its walls. Anna helped Eli settle on a pile of sacks in the corner farthest from the entrance, arranging blankets to make a comfortable nest for Sarah. "I should be up there," she said, frustration evident in her voice. "I can shoot better than half those men." "Your mother would never allow it," Eli replied, recalling the fierce protectiveness in the eyes of Anna's Apache mother. "I know," she sighed, "just as your Swift Eagle would never let you fight. He's not my Swift Eagle," Eli protested automatically. Anna gave him a look of surprising wisdom for her years. "He is, though. He claimed you and your sister as surely as if you were born to his people." She sat beside him in the dimness. "My father died when I was 4. I barely remember him. But I know what it looks like when a man decides to be a father to children not his own." Before Eli could respond, the sound of voices reached them, raised in challenge, though the words were indistinct through the cellar's heavy doors. Then came a single gunshot, its report muffled but unmistakable. Anna reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. Together they sat in tense silence as more shots followed. First isolated, then in clusters that suggested a proper exchange of fire. Sarah began to whimper, perhaps disturbed by the tension in Eli's body as he held her. "Talk to her," Anna suggested. "She knows your voice." Eli began to whisper to Sarah, telling her stories their mother had once told him, simple tales of clever animals and brave children. His voice shook at first, but grew steadier as he focused on his sister's wide eyes, fixed trustingly on his face. Above them, the sounds of conflict continued, shouts, more gunfire, the crash of breaking glass. Then, most terrifying of all, the heavy thud of running footsteps directly overhead. The cellar doors flew open, sending a shaft of daylight stabbing into the darkness. Eli tensed, pushing Sarah behind him protectively, but it was Widow Barrett who descended the steps, her face streaked with sweat and what might have been blood near her temple. "Come quickly," she said, her voice urgent but controlled. "We need to move you." "What's happening?" Anna demanded, already gathering blankets. "Cutter's men tried to set fire to the north side," Widow Barrett explained, helping Eli to his feet. "We've contained it for now, but the fighting's moved too close to the main building." As they emerged from the cellar, Eli blinked in the sudden brightness, taking in the scene with horror. Smoke rose from one of the smaller cabins, and the air rang with shouts and the crack of gunfire from behind the trading post. Two bodies lay motionless near the corral, Cutter's men, judging by their rough clothing and unfamiliar faces. "This way," Widow Barrett directed, guiding them along the side of the main building toward a small workshop used for leather tanning. "Thomas will watch over you here. It's stone, so less vulnerable to fire." They had nearly reached the workshop when a man staggered around the corner of the main building, a large man with a bushy beard and a filthy Union Army coat. Blood stained his left side, but the revolver in his right hand remained steady as he raised it, his face contorting with cruel recognition when he spotted Widow Barrett. "Found you, Barrett," he growled. "Cutter says to send his regards." Everything seemed to slow down. Eli saw Widow Barrett push Anna behind her with one arm while reaching for a weapon she no longer carried. He saw the man's finger tighten on the trigger, a smile of vicious triumph spreading across his bearded face. And then he saw a blur of movement from above. Swift Eagle leaping from the low roof of the workshop, his knife flashing in the sunlight. The shot went wild as Swift Eagle collided with the gunman, both men crashing to the ground in a tangle of limbs. They rolled in the dust, each struggling for dominance. Despite his wound, the bearded man was powerfully built, and for a terrible moment he gained the upper hand, pinning Swift Eagle beneath him. "Filthy Apache," he spat, raising a knife of his own. What happened next would remain etched in Eli's memory forever. Widow Barrett, unarmed but unflinching, seized a wooden bucket from beside the workshop and brought it down with tremendous force on the attacker's head. The man crumpled sideways, stunned, and Swift Eagle wasted no time in subduing him completely. "Are you hurt?" Widow Barrett demanded, helping Swift Eagle to his feet, her hands checking him for injuries with familiar concern. "No," he assured her, though Eli could see a cut along his forearm that would need attention. "But Cutter is here. He leads charge from front." A look passed between them. Determination mingled with something deeper, something forged in shared struggles over many years. "Get the children inside," Swift Eagle continued. "I return to fight." "Swift Eagle," Eli called, finding his voice at last. The warrior paused, turning back. "Be careful," Eli managed, inadequate words for the fear churning inside him. Swift Eagle's painted face softened. "I promise to keep you safe," he said simply. Apache does not break promise. Inside the stone workshop, Thomas, a weathered settler with a shotgun across his knees, kept watch through a narrow window. Anna helped settle Sarah on a pile of soft hides, while Eli paced anxiously, the sounds of ongoing conflict setting his nerves on edge. "Who's winning?" he finally asked Thomas. The old man glanced at him, his expression measured. "Hard to say. They've got numbers, but we've got position and determination." He checked his shotgun for what seemed the 100th time. "And we've got Swift Eagle and his warriors, which counts for a good deal." Another volley of gunfire erupted closer than before, followed by shouting. Thomas tensed, raising his weapon toward the door. "Get back with the girls," he ordered Eli. But before Eli could comply, the door burst open. Silhouetted against the daylight stood a tall man in a black duster, blood spattering his otherwise fine clothing, a revolver gripped in his gloved hand. His face was handsome in a hard way, with cold eyes that took in the workshop's occupants with calculating precision. "Well, well," he drawled as Thomas's shotgun swung toward him. "Hiding the little ones, are we?" "Get out, Cutter," Thomas growled. "You're not welcome here." So this was Silas Cutter, the man whose greed and hatred had brought violence to Cedar Creek. Eli found himself stepping forward, placing himself between the gunman and the corner where Sarah lay with Anna. "Brave lad," Cutter observed with mocking appreciation. "But bravery won't save this place. Barrett's little experiment in frontier harmony is finished." He gestured with his revolver. "The trading post burns as we speak." Thomas's finger tightened on the trigger of his shotgun. "You won't leave here alive if you harm these children." Cutter's smile never reached his eyes. "Who said anything about harming them? I'm a businessman, not a monster. The children will fetch a fine price from the right buyers down south." The implication struck Eli like a physical blow. Cutter wasn't just after the trading post. He was after them, intended to sell them just as surely as if they had remained on the auction block in Clearwater. What happened next unfolded with dreamlike clarity. Thomas, lunging forward with unexpected speed for a man his age. Cutter's revolver barking once, twice, the old settler stumbling, falling. And then Eli, driven by desperate instinct, grabbing a leather-working knife from the nearby table and throwing it with all his might. The knife missed Cutter entirely, clattering harmlessly against the wall behind him. The gunman laughed, a sound cut abruptly short as an arrow sprouted from his shoulder with a meaty thunk. Swift Eagle stood in the doorway, already knocking another arrow. "Drop gun," he commanded, "or next arrow finds heart." Cutter's face contorted with hatred. For a breathless moment, Eli thought he would risk the shot anyway. Then slowly the gunman lowered his weapon. "You've lost, Cutter," came Widow Barrett's voice as she appeared behind Swift Eagle, the rifle in her hands steady and sure. "Your men are either dead, wounded, or fled. Cedar Creek stands." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Cutter and his surviving men were bound and placed under guard. The wounded, on both sides, were tended to in the main building, which, contrary to Cutter's claim, had suffered damage but remained largely intact. Thomas, shot in the shoulder and side, was expected to recover, thanks to Widow Barrett's skilled nursing. As sunset painted the sky in hues of amber and rose, Eli sat on the trading post's porch steps, Sarah sleeping peacefully in his arms. The day's violence seemed surreal now, like a nightmare fading in the face of evening's tranquility. From within came the murmur of adult voices discussing what would be done with the prisoners, how to rebuild what had been damaged, how to strengthen their defenses against future threats. Swift Eagle emerged from the building, his face now cleaned of war paint, his wounded arm bandaged. Without a word, he lowered himself to sit beside Eli. "Is it really over?" Eli asked softly, not wanting to wake Sarah. Swift Eagle nodded, his gaze on the sunset. "Cutter will face territory judge. His men too. Many settlers witnessed their attack on peaceful trading post." A hint of satisfaction colored his voice. "Even those who do not love Apache understand right from wrong." Eli absorbed this, relief washing through him. "What happens now to Cedar Creek, to us?" Swift Eagle was quiet for a long moment. "Cedar Creek continues," he finally said. "Stronger, perhaps, for having defended what it stands for." He glanced at Eli. "As for you and Sarah—" "The orphan train," Eli said, his heart sinking. "Mrs. Barrett mentioned it when we first arrived." "Rebecca Barrett has changed her mind," Swift Eagle replied, a subtle warmth in his voice that Eli had rarely heard. "She asks if you wish to stay, to make home here." Hope, fragile and tremulous, unfurled in Eli's chest. "Stay? Permanently?" Swift Eagle nodded. "She says trading post needs young hands, young hearts. Says you and Sarah belong here now." He hesitated, then added, I also wish for you to stay. Eli looked up at him, startled by the admission. You do? Yes. Swift Eagle's voice was low, almost uncertain, a warrior venturing onto unfamiliar ground. I cannot replace father you lost, but I can teach, can protect, can... He seemed to search for the right word. Care. The simple declaration, delivered without flourish or sentimentality, moved Eli more deeply than any elaborate promise could have. He thought of everything that had transpired since that terrible day on the auction block, the journey through wilderness, the dangers faced, the lessons learned. He thought of Swift Eagle's patience, his wisdom, his undemonstrative but unwavering protection. I'd like that, Eli whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might somehow break the moment. I think Sarah would too. Swift Eagle's hand came to rest briefly on Eli's shoulder, a touch that conveyed what words could not. Together, they watched as the last rays of sunlight gilded the mountains, transforming the ordinary landscape into something magnificent. Swift Eagle, Eli said, as darkness began to settle over Cedar Creek. When you first saw us in Clearwater, me and Sarah on the auction block, why did you decide to help us, really? The Apache warrior's gaze remained on the distant horizon, where stars were beginning to appear one by one. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of memory. I saw child trying to protect what he loved, he said simply. Saw courage where others saw only broken rules. Reminded me that strength comes in many forms. He looked down at Sarah, peaceful in sleep. Also saw chance to help where I could not be helped when my family was taken. Eli understood then how healing sometimes comes not from receiving help, but from giving it. How saving another can begin to mend one's own broken places. Widow Barrett joined them on the porch, her weary face softened by the day's ending. Without comment, she settled into the space on Eli's other side, completing their unlikely circle. I've been thinking, she said after a comfortable silence, that the school could use an assistant teacher, someone good with young children who knows both worlds. Her gaze rested meaningfully on Swift Eagle. The Apache raised an eyebrow. You speak of me? Your English is excellent. You read well, and the children already look up to you, she replied matter-of-factly. Besides, it would give you reason to stay more permanently at Cedar Creek. Something unspoken passed between them, a current of understanding that had perhaps been there for years, waiting for the right moment to be acknowledged. I will consider, Swift Eagle said, but Eli caught the note of pleased surprise in his voice. As full night embraced the valley, lanterns were lit along the trading post's paths, their warm glow pushing back the darkness. Tomorrow would bring work, repairs to make, wounds to heal, plans to lay for Cedar Creek's future. But tonight, sitting between these two remarkable adults, with Sarah safe in his arms, Eli felt something he had not experienced since before his parents fell ill, the quiet certainty of belonging. The bone eagle still rested in his pocket, a tangible reminder of loss transformed into connection. Like Swift Eagle, like Widow Barrett, like Cedar Creek itself, Eli and Sarah stood at the crossroads of different worlds. The path ahead would not always be easy, but they would walk it together, forging a family from shared courage and chosen bonds stronger than blood. And that, Eli realized as he gazed up at the star-filled sky, was worth more than all the gold in the territory.